And especially when they had so much to gain. Real estate prices were rising. At one point in California, they took a survey, I think back in 2005, and the average home buyer believed that his house was going to appreciate by 20% a year for the next 10 years. That was what was expected. Now, you think about, at the time, the average California home was selling for about $500,000, which was about 10 times what the average household actually earned, right? But these guys actually believed that if they bought that house, they would make $3 million over the next 10 years. That's what they believed. Now, is it any wonder that they lied on their mortgage to get that $3 million? Is it any wonder that they signed up for a teaser rate? You think they cared what happened to the loan 2 or 3 or 5 years from now? They didn't care what the reset was. They were going to be rich. All they had to do was buy the house and they were going to be rich. It didn't matter what the mortgage payment was going to be because the house would take care of it. In fact, if you figure what the average Californian expected to earn on house appreciation, it exceeded what he expected to earn from his job. So it was like it used to be that you'd work hard and have a job so you can afford a house. But it became the fact that, well, if you have a house, you don't need a job. And in fact, in the past, people used to, if you lost your job, you might have to sell your house. No, not like in California. If you lost your job, you just bought a vacation house because you got the extra income. Houses were not expenses. They just, they were free. Because if you had a $500,000 house, it's appreciating $100,000, $200,000 a year. And for a few years, it worked. The people that bought houses were getting rich. And the banks made it very easy to monetize that gain. You didn't even have to sell your house to make the money because you could borrow out all the appreciation and still live there. Right? So it's like the goose that kept laying golden eggs. Nobody would sell one of these things. Why would anybody want to sell a house? They just kept going up. And you can buy another house with nothing. So, nobody wanted to sell. Everybody wanted to buy. Of course, I knew at the time that this was all going to change. I was renting, and I was watching all the nonsense. I rented a house in California. And I rented this place, and when I first moved in, I think they were selling for about $1 million, $1.1 million. These little townhomes. And I rented it for about $4,200 or $4,700. And at the time I rented it, I was like, well, it's no-brainer. The rent, compared to the property tax, the homeowner's fees. I knew, but I lived in that house for almost 2 years. And when I moved out, they were selling for over $2 million apiece. So obviously, I could have made a lot of money had I bought and sold, had I flipped one of those things. But when I moved out, the new guy that rented my house, I think he had to pay an extra $200 more than I paid. But it was an extra million. So obviously, the prices had absolutely nothing to do with the rents. In fact, the place I rent now, people still always ask me, why are you throwing your money away on rent? I go, I'm not throwing my money away. I need to live. They don't ask me why I'm throwing my money away on food or throwing my money away on, whatever else I'm buying. But that was the realtors, right? If you're renting, you're throwing your money away. As if buying a house, you get to live for free. I said, well, why are you throwing your money away on mortgage, on insurance, on maintenance, on taxes? I'm not worried about any of that. I live in a huge house now, and I pay first and last and the security deposit. That was it. But I know that the rent that I'm paying after my landlord pays their property taxes, they're getting less than a 1% return on what they paid for the property, assuming nothing goes wrong. Because if anything breaks, they got to fix it, which is going to destroy their 1%. So basically, I get all the enjoyment of the property and none of the headaches, and my landlord gets all the headaches and none of the enjoyment. So what's the good deal there? But the realtors, the realtors were able to redefine the American dream, right? The American dream was always, you save your money, you work hard, and anybody can succeed. You don't have to be born to a royal family. You don't have to be an aristocrat. Anybody of modest means can grow up to be a captain of industry, can be president of the United States. That was the American dream. Somehow the realtors turned it into home ownership and buying a home and just getting rich. That was the American dream, that you didn't have to work. Well, that dream is now dying. And if you want to see a very good presentation, because I don't want to spend too much time on it, but if you go on YouTube, I made a presentation in front of the Western Regional Mortgage Bankers. I spoke at their annual conference 2 years in a row, 2005 and 2006. Now, they stopped inviting me, so I don't know, maybe they don't have a conference anymore. I don't know if they have enough members left. But I spoke in 2005, and I said a lot of things were going to happen, and they brought me back in 2006 because a lot of things did happen. But the 2006 presentation is on YouTube, and it's 8 clips, and it's a lot of really good stuff on the real estate market. So, and it's a lot better to watch what I said back then because none of it had happened yet. So talking about it now, I don't look as smart. But anyway, so we had this gigantic bubble. And the bigger problem here was the lenders. And I knew that when the real estate bubble burst, that was going to be the end of it. Because I knew that the banks and the financial institutions had as the bedrock of their assets all these IOUs, all these mortgages. Well, if the mortgage holders don't pay, then the assets aren't worth what everybody thinks they are, which means the banks are undercapitalized. And I knew just by looking at it that Fannie and Freddie were going to have to go bankrupt. I knew they guaranteed 50% of the mortgages, and I knew that those mortgages were not worth anywhere near what Fannie and Freddie thinks. I knew what people were borrowing to buy these houses, so I knew that ultimately, when people didn't pay, the companies would have to go under. And anybody who bought, I knew about the securitization process. I knew because at the time I was helping a guy set up a hedge fund in 2005 that was shorting subprime mortgages, and I learned about the whole securitization industry, and I knew that there were a lot of people that owned these structured products, which was one of the main reasons that there was a market for them. The reason that it was so easy for people to borrow all this money to buy houses was because of securitization. I mean, first it started with Freddie and Fannie, right? If it wasn't for Freddie Mae and Freddie Mac, Americans couldn't have borrowed all this money to buy houses. The only reason they did it was because the U.S. government was co-signing their mortgages. And people knew, well, if you lend somebody money to buy a house, and if they can't pay you back, the government will pay you back. And so people were able to borrow a lot more money than a free market would have allowed because the government was there co-signing it. But there were some mortgages that the government wouldn't co-sign. These were the ones known as the subprime mortgages. But Wall Street figured out that, well, we can securitize these mortgages. The government won't guarantee them, but we're going to buy them all up and put them into these structured products. And by structuring them like this, we're going to reduce the risk. And it was crazy, but something like, after they sliced and diced them, better than 2/3 of these subprime mortgages. And these are mortgages where people put nothing down, have lousy FICO scores, don't have jobs, are in prison, whatever it was. These mortgages, 2/3 of them were rated AAA. AAA. I mean, how can that be? I said, how can you take all these lousy mortgages and they're rated AAA? Well, I mean, but it was because Wall Street was able to securitize all these bonds and sell them to the Japanese and sell them to the Chinese and sell them to the hedge funds that there was demand. And of course, why was there so much demand for high-yielding assets? Because the Fed had interest rates too low. Everybody needed yield, and they were willing to take risks to get it. And where did all these foreign central banks get all this money that they recycled back into these bonds? Because of our trade deficits, because rates were too low. So you had the government perpetuating this crisis, and you had the attitude that that real estate prices couldn't fall. I mean, I remember I had a booth in Phoenix, Arizona, at an investment conference. This is probably back in 2004, 2005. There was a guy right in a booth next to me, and he had a real estate company. And what this guy did was he put people together who had lousy credit and who couldn't buy homes with people who had good credit. And the people with good credit co-signed the loans for the people with lousy credit.